So we're in the middle of the discussion here about Hilchas Chalamayid, and we said that there's an Isser Malacha on Chalamayid. You're not allowed to do Malacha on Chalamayid, except it said in the first mission in the Masechta, it said that if it's a Beis HaShlachin, meaning if it's a type of situation where doing the Malacha is going to allow you to avoid financial loss, then it's going to be mutter. Said in the Mishnah. We also said over there that if it requires particularly strenuous effort to do the Malacha, then it's going to be usher. It's a zilzul and yantiv, the zilzul and chalamayid. And again, the whole point of these halachas really are in order to make sure that chalamayid, which is yantiv, are kept with a certain level of respect and honor. And therefore, if a person does malacha, he's going to be protected from the yantiv. Whereas if he's having a scenario where he's having major financial loss, a major financial loss creates a tremendous amount of akmas nefesh. A person's mind can lose, it's hard to stay settled when you're losing money, and so his simchas yantiv is anyways going to be a problem, so he might as well do the malacha to take care of it. That's a unique feature of chalamayid, so to speak, because that's not the case by yantiv and Shabbos, where we don't say just because a person's has an isser malacha, but we feel really bad, it's really hard for you, we don't say okay, no problem, you can jump in a car and then you go do what you got to do. But chalamayid is unique in that sense, is that whether you hold it to Rabbanan for sure, or even if you hold the Isser's Deraisa, so the understanding in the Gemara, it's a Gemara in Chagiga, is that it was the Torah gives the Chachamim the ability to define what is and isn't malacha on chalamayid. Okay, so that was our Mishnah. This Mishnah here is really a continuation of the same idea. Really, the Mishnah before, above, and this Mishnah here are continuing in the idea of how do we deal with scenarios of a davar ovid when you're having a loss. This Mishnah is going to introduce the distinction between when the loss is a small loss versus when it's a heavy loss. And again, it's not clear, a small loss, heavy loss financially, what exactly the difference is. Meaning, I don't think we're discussing a currency question of it's $1 versus $100 or whatever. It seems one is viewed more as what's perceived as a significant loss, like a loss that someone is going to have major agmas nefesh from, like a major stress, versus something that a person really wouldn't want to have happen, but isn't necessarily going to majorly impact their life. So let's see it on the inside. Now, on chalamayid, it's usher, and on Shabbos and Yontif, it's usher to trap. Trapping an animal is usher, digging is a problem, various different malachas. Building and destroying are problem. These are all malachas. So on chalamayid, these things would all be usher unless you could find a reason to say that they're mutter for these reasons. So it says in the Mishnah, Sadin esa ishus, you could trap ishus. What are ishus? We'll get to it in the Gemara, but it's a type of rodent of some type. The English word for it is a mole rat, which I actually was looking it up last night. Apparently, this Gemara here is referencing this animal that has it's a very important animal right now. Meaning, I brought it up a little bit. There's something called a Middle Eastern mole rat. They either call it, to remain politically correct, it's either called an Israeli mole rat or Palestinian mole rat. No, I'm not even joking. That's what's being discussed in this Mishnah, right? And the capture of this animal is what we're going to be discussing here. So how to capture this animal, I found academic articles, historical and archaeological articles in Scientific American, a couple of different magazines, that were talking about this animal as very interesting. It says that there was this scientist was going on with some sort of an excavation, research, whatever, trying to understand. They're using this animal, this mole rat is apparently very, resistant to all forms of cancer, meaning different than mice and rats, which they're able to develop cancer very easily. These animals do not develop cancer almost at all. And so they're trying to catch them in order to be able to use them as an experimental animal. So the process these articles go through in terms of how to determine how do you catch them is exactly how the Gemara defines the process of catching them. I just find it to be so interesting that really they found these two Arab. They've
2135.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't think anyone was listening. Don't get nervous. But so I found this article where these mole rats, these animals, the way that they're currently called in Israel by these scientists, article in Scientific American, the exact process they talk about is discussed in our Gemara. And what I mean to say by that is just simply you see that these animals were plaguing these pests were plaguing this area of the Levant, right? Israel, Syria. What's that?
I did hear it.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I went back a little bit for Talmud. So I just find it very interesting. We'll see in the Gemara. But anyway, the Mishnah says that these types of animals, these mole rats, you can trap them, vesachbarim and rats and mice, misdei ha'ilan u'misdei ha'lavim. You can trap them whether you're talking about a grain field or you're talking about a tree field. Now, that's the difference between a tree field and a wheat field. As it pertains to this, we're talking about the type of damage that the animal can do to this type of field. If it's a stei ha'ilan, it does significantly more damage to the trees and the roots than it does to a stei lavan. For whatever reason, the mole rat is significantly more interested in the trees, but the stei lavan, it could also do damage. So the Tanakama of the Mishnah says that you can trap them. Kedarko, meaning you don't have to do any type of shinoi. Bimmayat and chalamayat, and not only that, you could also do it with shvius. And we'll have to see exactly why would you think you can trap. There's no isser to trap on shvius. We'll see that part of the way you trap these animals is by digging a hole. And the chiddush is that even though digging a hole is working in the land, and working the land on shvius is a problem, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that you don't have to do it with the shinoi and it's going to be mutter. That's the shita of the Tanakama, the Chachamim Oimrim, and we'll see in the Gemara that this Chachamim is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. They make a distinction, and this is going to be consistent a little bit with what I mentioned earlier, that we make a distinction when we talk about Hilchas Chalamayid between when the loss is significant versus when the loss is only a small loss. When we say that you can trap it in the normal manner, that's by a steha ilan where the hefset, the loss is great. But if it's a grain field where the damage these animals do is not that significant, you're not going to lose a lot of money. Shalei kedarka, you could do it, but you have to employ a shinoi, some type of change from the normal path of how you would normally trap. And therefore it would be mutter. So that's the machlekes here between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. And then continues the Mishnah, umakrin as hapirtze b'mayid, you can fix a hole in a fence or a wall on chalamayid, and we'll see in the Gemara exactly what it's talking about. Ubishvias boina kedarkos. So the seeming diak here is you can only fix a wall on chalamayid, but on shvias you can even build a wall from scratch. It's much more you cannot build a wall from scratch on chalamayid. This will be, according to most Rishonim, the introduction of a new idea, which is that not only do we discuss a heter of davra oven when you're losing something, but perhaps there's another heter, or maybe chumrah, on which perspective you're coming from, is if the action is a maisa umen, and maisa umen means it's a professional behavior, right? So fixing a wall, like by patching it up with, you put a board next to it to cover up the hole, that's, a layperson can do that. But to go ahead and get some bricks and cement, and to lay the bricks properly, you need a bricklayer to come. That's a maisa and that already could be, it's a problem. Maybe that's going to be usher, even if there's going to be a scenario of loss. So we'll see in the Gemara exactly what it's referring to. Okay, on chalamayid, yeah. And it says a b'shvius, you can even build it from scratch, but on chalamayid it seems building it from scratch would be a problem. So now the Gemara is just bothered. What are these ishus? I described them as a mole rat. Zok the Gemara, my ishus, Amar of Yehuda, Beria she'ein la einayim. It's a creature that has no eyes. It's a creature that has no eyes, meaning it is blind. Right now, that happens to be the mole rat has eyes the size of poppy seeds that don't function. They live underground the entire time. And what we mean when we say that they don't see, that since they're basically living throughout a series of tunnels underground, that's their whole life, they're living underground, they navigate through a combination of smell and hearing. Even their hearing, their ears are embedded inside their head so that no dirt gets inside their ears. They literally live in the dark. They're about the size of a rat. They're a tiny little animal. Ugly animals. Amar Rava bar Shishmael v'Isema Rav Yemar bar Shalmei Mikra, that these animals are, that they can't see. Okay, so the pasuk says shablu, like a snail, temes yahaloch, it just disintegrates when it goes. Nefel Eishes Bal Chazu Shamash. You see it uses the lashon of Eishes, which is Ishus. Bal Chazu Shamash. It sees it doesn't see the sun. Meaning the point is these animals, these Eishes, they don't see the sun. Fine. This is like the Mishnah, that you can trap them the proper way. You don't have to employ a shinoi. And not only that, you can even destroy ant hills, ant homes. You could basically destroy them. Now, how do you destroy them? Ask the Gemara. We're going to learn a little pest control according to Chazal. Yeah, maybe offer michur zev, and you got to take the soil from one family of ants and take it over to the other family of ants, and by doing that, you basically are going to introduce like new nutrients, new components from one group of dirt to the other, and the ants are going to then kill each other. Doesn't mean that the ants are going to kill each other. It means the dirt from one area is probably going to have some negative chemical effect on the ants from the other side, and therefore they're going to kill each other and they're going to go. This is only going to be the case when they're on opposite sides of the river. Meaning, in order to be machriv them, you have to. The way you destroy them is by taking dirt from the other side, but it will not work if they're all part of the same area. You have to be grabbing dirt from the other side of the river so that the chemical density or the nutrient density of that other dirt is going to be so significantly different than what they're used to that it's going to create a problem that'll end up killing them. Vehu deleka gishara, if it doesn't have a bridge. Vehu deleka gamla, also another type of bridge. Vehu deleka mitzra. These are all different ways for the little bugs to get across. If there's a way for them to get across, then the assumption is that the ants that come from colony A are not going to have this destructive effect on colony B and vice versa. So therefore, that work. Meaning, and what's the chiddush here? The chiddush is, and if that's the case, you can't do it because it's a tircha shelo l'tzarach. It would have no heter to do it. The only reason why you're allowed to do it is because it's actually going to destroy these ant hills on the whatever. And again, the whole reason why you're doing this is because even these ants are going to be destroying your crops and everything like that. So it's not going to help. Then you'd have no heter to do it. The point is that in all of these scenarios, you can destroy or kill these animals or trap these animals. And the reason why it's mutter is because it's a davra of it. If you don't do it, you're going to end up losing your crops. Continues the Gemara, ad kama, until what point, and here there's two ways to read this, we'll just keep it simple, meaning this halacha, that you have a heter to do the malacha of killing these ants, which is only true if you're taking dirt from across the river in a way where they can't get to each other. Ad kama, how far away do they have to be from each other in order for it to be that you'd have this heter? So the halacha is only if it's after a parsa. If it's within a parsa, meaning a parsa is roughly 8,000 feet, if it's within a parsa, then the halacha, or maybe a parsa is 4,000 feet, I always forget. Ad kama ad parsa, within that parsa, the halacha is even if there is a river, even if you have the bridge, it doesn't help.
8,000 amas.
8,000 amas, so 8,000 amas, and then we're talking about closer to 6.
Between 2.3 miles and 3 miles.
So yeah, 16,000 feet. Okay. So ad parsa means within a parsa, then this won't even help. You can't even do it. Outside of a parsa, even if when there's a river and you have all these things, then you can take the dirt. If it's outside of a parsa and you have a bridge or you don't have a river, whatever it is, then even there you can't do it. Tosfos learns the other way that a parsa is lakula, meaning that outside of a parsa you don't even need to come onto this. You can take the dirt. Within a parsa you can only be this way. But either way, that's the Gemara. We're continuing in the Gemara with a little bit more pest control. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mistei ha'ilon kedarko mistei ha'lavan shalei kedarko. This is a quote of the Chachamim, but the Gemara here is quoting it as Rabbi Yehuda. This is his opinion that he makes a distinction between when the hefsed is a hefsed meruba versus when the hefsed is only a minor hefsed. Taner Rabbanan ketzad kedarko. What does it mean when you're trapping these animals the normal way without the shinoi? It's chayfer guma v'toila b'mitzoda. You dig a hole and you hang a trap in it. And ketzad shaloi kedarka is noyet shpud. You take a big spit and you shove it into the ground. Umake bekurdum, and you hit it with a hammer. Umer dahadam mitachtel, and the dirt that's under the shpud will sort of vibrate back and forth. And Rashi says over here, and you're memayachosan. However, I just want to read from this scientist. Well, that's what Rashi said. I'm going to tell you what I found in this article by these scientists who are actually using these animals for cancer research. How do they do it? It should take a minute to read it. It's not that bad. So it says over here, what brought this diverse group together of scientists was research on the blind mole rat, a furry saucer with comically prominent teeth. Blind mole rats make their burrows underground, hence the blindness, which we mentioned earlier. Their eyes are covered by a layer of skin and large teeth, which they use to dig through the dirt. They're so common in Israel that on the drive up, the scientists kept pointing out mole rats' mounds along the way. They really destroy the ground. It literally looks like someone dropped a bomb. It's a big, these tiny little animals create these tremendous problems for the vegetation. A hoe is all Ali and Hassan, the Arab hunters from the West Bank, used to catch these mole rats. As the Czechs went to set their traps, they were the scientists. Ali and Hassan took their hoes out into the field. Hunting mole rats is a matter of patience. First, the hunters open up the mound to expose the tunnel running underneath. Then they wait. Sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes all day, according to Ali. The mole rat will eventually come out to fix its mound when it senses air rushing through the hole that they've just uncovered. Then a quick whack with the hoe right behind the animal, blocking its escape path back into the tunnel, caught. That's literally how they would do it, which tells me that what the Gemara is describing here is probably something very similar to that. Meaning the way you would end up catching these animals is you would open up the hole that they dug this hole. You open it up, let's air it. They're going to come up to sort of sense that hole. They come out to inspect. You then smack the dirt, and that's what it literally says. The dirt fills the hole in under the animal, and now it's stuck above ground. It doesn't have the ability to furrow right back in. You got it. You can trap it. So that's the way to do it b'shinui. Apparently that's not, let's say, the typical way. The typical way is just leave it trapped by the hole, and eventually one day it's going to come out, the trap will catch it. But if you want to sit there and wait, so it says over here that that's the shinoi. Meaning, and the din of our Mishnah is that if it's talking about a stay Elon where the damage is aggressive, then you could even do it the normal way. If it's only talking about a stay Lavan where the damage is not that aggressive, it's not a hefsid meruv, it's only hefsid mu'at, then you could do it with this. You have to do it with this shinoi. Tanya Reb Shimon Elazar Aimer Kisha Amru Mistei Lavan Shalai Kedarko. And this that we're making a distinction between doing it with a shinoi and not a shinoi with when it's a hefsid mu'at, that is like Amru Ela Bisada Lavan Hasmuch Le'ir, when the field we're talking about has no way for these mole rats that normally make, they're not near any sort of a tree field, right? Aval b'stei lavan hasmuch l'stei ha'ilon. If the field is close to a stei ilan, where what? Afilu kedarko, it's going to be mutter. Why? Because shema yetzim stei lavan v'yachriva. So that's a very logical thing. These mole rats, they don't know the distinction necessarily between where the lines of the field stop. They're going to start digging in. They really do like the tree roots significantly more than the roots of wheat or barley or whatever, and therefore there's a bigger concern for hefsid meruba. And then even the damage that they're doing in the stay lavan is going to rise to the level that you don't need to employ a shinoi. But again, the point over here is we're introducing this idea that by hefsid, we are now making a distinction between a hefsid meruba versus a hefsid mu'at, which until now we had not seen. The Gemara continues, the Mishnah had said, that you can fix a hole in a fence or a wall on chalamayid, but it said in the Mishnah, and on Shvius, you can even build it brand new. So Zakti Gemara, Ketzad Makran, how exactly is it that you're doing this fixing? And the Gemara is understanding that this fixing is not a permanent fix, it's a temporary fix, because otherwise they would have said you could just build a brand new wall. So Zakti Gemara, Rav Yosef on Bahutza V'dafna, you basically use schach, you basically take Hutza V'dafna, which is some type of, thorns and decal and reeds, whatever it is, and you basically, it's just a temporary thing. It's there just to sort of prevent people from coming through. You don't want people to pass through your backyard, let's say. You could even take some bricks and pebbles and rocks, and you could build a sort of makeshift wall with that. However, and this is important, you can't cement it in. So this line here of Ketzad Makran and these two observations of what can be done is introducing a third idea that we're seeing in Hilchos Cholamayid, which is something referred to, I mentioned before, as a Maisa Umin, meaning building a brand new wall or cementing it in, being a bricklayer. That's a Maisa Umin. That's not so simple that's mutter and cholamayid in all scenarios. Maybe there it's only going to be mutter if it's a hefsid meruba, but not if it's only a hefsid mu'at. And that's what we're about to discuss. Amr Chizda Leishanu, this whole din that we just said in our Mishnah, that you can't build a brand new wall, right? You can't cement it in. You can only sort of put a temporary situation up. Leishanu ala kaisel hagina. All you're discussing is protecting against like your backyard, where you don't really have much going on back there. Maybe you have a garden, maybe there's some fruit and vegetables. It's not exactly like your big farm. It's not where you're keeping all of your stuff. Therefore, the hefsid there would be equivalent to like a hefsid mu'at. That would be like the equivalent of a stay lavan according to the Mishnah. So that type of a stay lavan, we said before that you can do it only with a shinoi because the hefsid's not that great. So now what we're saying over here is that if you want to fix the wall, you could do it with this sort of makeshift type of wall. It's like a shinoi. It's like, what's the reason why a shinoi works? This is how the Mefarshim explain this juxtaposition of these two dinim in the Mishnah, is that what is a shinoi really? A shinoi isn't like a kla'achar yad of like machleches machsheves. It's more that there's an isser of doing something as a maisa umen, and of doing it with a shinoi basically is meaning that it's not a maisa umen, because a plumber wouldn't take a knife and a fork to fix a pipe. It comes with his tools and he does his whole shebang. But you and I, we're sitting in the house, we have a leak, we take some duct tape, we do it like a layperson. That's going to be mutter on a chalamayid. So a maisa umen is going to be mutter only if it's a hefsid meruba. But if it's a hefsid mu'at, if it's not that big of a hefsid, then you can't use a maisa umen. You have to sort of use a maisa hedjit. So that's what the Gemara is saying over here. You can't build a brand new wall like a bricklayer, which would be a maisa umen. Only a maisa hedjit, which would be, let's say, just like a patchwork fence. You take a piece of wood, whatever you put it up. Rav Chizda tells us that this is, of course, only true if the hefsid is a hefsid mu'at, like a gina, where all you're losing a couple of fruits and vegetables, no big deal. Aval koisel hachatzer. If you're talking about the wall to your yard and kol shekein the wall to your house, where there's a potential, Rashi says here, for gneva, you could really lose all your possessions. There, boina kedarka, you can go ahead, take cement, patchwork, build it up properly, build a nice, beautiful wall. So this din of Rav Chizda, who's an Amayra, not a Tana, who was explaining this entire concept that a Maisa Umen is going to be mutter if you're talking about a very large hefsid, that Lema Misayeh, I have a Tesefta that's I could bring a riot to. Koisel Hagoichel Rishus Harabim, what if I have a wall that is leaning out from my Chatzar into a Rishus Harabim, where what Soiser Ubayna, the halach is I'm allowed to take it down and rebuild it. Kedarkai, meaning I could do it with cement, I could mamish build a brand new wall. Why? So I have a Tesefta that says I could take this wall, which is leaning out into the Rishus Harabim, it's creating a matzvah sakana. I'm allowed to knock it down. It's chalamayid, it's malach of seiser, and not only that, Baina, I could build it again. So the Gemara wants to say, I have a riot to Rav Chizda. Now you have to think about it for a second. We have to pretend for a minute that we didn't see the words mipnei sakana. It's mashma in this brisa, this tesefta, that you can go ahead and build it. So how come you're allowed to build it? So maybe the way you'll read it is like this: why can you take it down? You can take it down mipnei sakana. Building it has nothing to do with sakana, right? Building is more for your protection. So maybe that's the raya. The raya is the stira. I could take the wall down because it's sakana. Maybe it's going to fall on someone. But what right do I have to go ahead and rebuild it? I only have a right to rebuild it. It must be like Rav Chizda. Why? Because I'm rebuilding my chutzer's wall because I want to protect the loss, even though it's a ma'aseh and a chalmai. The Gemara says no. You can't bring me a riot from here. It says mipnei sakana. Meaning what? Meaning maybe the argument will be the only reason why you're allowed to rebuild the wall is because if you didn't let you rebuild it, maybe you wouldn't even take it down to begin with, right? Like that's the reason why, like Bahatzala, we tell them that if we would tell them they can't drive back after they go out to pick up a call. Maybe they'll just turn off their thing and they won't take calls. So we tell them they have a heter to come back, even though really there's no be'etzem heter, there's no sakanas nefashos that they're saving on the way back after the job. It's called what they call sofa mishum tchila. So we want to make sure that we get the primary objective done. So we tell them that it's mutter to do it even afterwards. So to over here, maybe that's going to be the answer of the Gemara. But la'olam, if there would be no sakana, could be there's no raya. So the Gemara says no raya. Fine. Once you tell me there's no raya, maybe I can use this Tesefta as a kasha on Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda, you told me I could build a wall from scratch like a bricklayer, a Maisa Umen, when it's a hefsid meruba. I have a kasha. I have a Mufurshah Tesefta that says not like that. Tashma, what do you see? You can take this wall down and only rebuild it. Why? Because mipnei sakana in shaloi mipnei sakana lights mashma without a sakana. Not only would you not be allowed to take it down, but if for some reason it had been taken down, you'd have no right to rebuild it. This is leimat tiavet yuf the Rav Chizda. This is a kasha Rav Chizda. No, like I explained the Gemara above, you'll say the same thing here. Hassam, the reason why you were allowed to, why did it say mibnei sakana? Because it was asking you to do two things. Hassam soiser ubayna. So therefore, of course, there's no heter to be soser a wall if it's. Oh, we're back. You are.
I put it here.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, so far. It's maybe a spotty one. I feel bad. Dan was on. I don't know if Dan's going to come back on.
Text them.
Yeah, text him to come back on.
Yeah.
So what are we saying? Rav Chizda, we have a kashan Rav Chizda from this brayso. You can only rebuild the wall if it's building a wall that was taken down because of sakana. Without a sakana, maybe you have no raya. They'll say no. They'll say over there, the reason it's a sakana is because to take it down, you needed the sakana. To build it back up again, that's going to be mutter, right? It's Hasam Nami. Fine. So Gemara says now this next line of the Gemara is no longer a kashan Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda has an explanation for the brayso. In fact, Rav Chizda might even tell you the brayso is a raya to him because he'll say, "Why are you allowed to rebuild it?" I mean, he may not agree with the concept of Seif Mishum Tchila. So he'll say it's because I'm allowed to build such a wall. But the Maksha had a kasha, so Rav Chizda pushed the kasha away. Now the Gemara asks the kasha, wait 1 second. The Gemara is trying to figure it out. So then why, according to Rav Chizda, we know why you're allowed to rebuild it. But according to us, why are you allowed to rebuild it? Hasam Nami, lister, meaning the Rav Chizda, the Gemara is asking on itself. Why am I allowed to rebuild this wall? Stira is Mishem Sakana. Building, what did I have to do with Sakana? Gemara says, like I explained before, this is the self Mishum Tchila. So the Gemara is just spelling out its Ravashi. So what are we basically saying? Rav Chizda is saying the following statement: when it's a hefsid mu'it, then you're right. The Mishnah says you can't use a Maisa Umin. You can only be done with a Maisa Hedyet, and therefore you can't build a beautiful wall. You have to use these hoots of the dafna, put up a board, whatever. But it's a hefsid meruba, then you even can use a Maisa Umin. You can even brick lay like a professional. Amar Rav Ashi masnisa nami that this is true. Now, exactly what the here is. The juxtaposition, our Mishnah between was everything we've been discussing in the Mishnah that you can't build a regular wall is by chalamoyah, but by shuvas you can build a full wall. So the question is, where is this wall being built? Meaning, is it a gina or is it a chatzar? If it's a gina, meaning a hefsid mu'et, then it's one halacha. If it's going to be a chatzar, there's a hefsed meruba, then it's another halacha. So the Gemara says, "Ilema de chatzar." You want to tell me it's talking about? Are you in Florida? That is a beautiful view.
I don't get it. But Shvi,
Hello, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Dan, beautiful.
What's going on here? Shvi is Banakadarkai. Why would you think you're not allowed to?
Well, we'll get to that in a second. So Shvius, the halacha is you're not allowed. Well, so we'll get to it in a second. Let's just first deal with the Ukimta in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah is telling me that there's a chiddush that, despite the fact that let me say it this way. The Mishnah is telling me that although you're allowed to build a temporary structure to fill in the gap of the wall, you can't build a full wall from scratch. Whereas in Shvius, you can build a full wall from scratch. So before we get to the question of what's the discussion about Shvius, let's figure out what's the conversation. Are we talking about where the wall that you're repairing is a wall of your backyard, where it's just a hefsed mu'at that you're fixing, or is it a hefsed meruba? If it's a hefsed meruba, then it's going to be a kash on Rav Chizda, right? Because Rav Chizda would say a hefsed meruba, you should even be allowed to build a full wall. We're going to prove that it must be talking about a case where it's a hefsed mu'at, and that's the reason why you can't build a full wall. You can only repair it. Now, what's the raya that it's a hefsed mu'at? So the Gemara, deheicha ilema de chatzar, meaning it's a hefsed meruba. So then tzarich lemeimer, you need to tell me that if it's talking about a chatzar where there's a... Okay, continuing. Oh, we're back. So back to the Gemara. The Gemara is trying to prove from Rav Ashi that the Mishnah is also a diak. The Tani, I'm just reading it for the recording. Ubishviyas boina kedarka dehecha. What's it talking about? It must be it's talking about that it's a hefsed mu'at, because ilema de chatzar, that it's a hefsed meruba, tzrich lemeimar. There's no actual agriculture happening in your chatzar. That's your storage room. So there's no shvius related halacha that you can even have there. Elamai must be talking elalav degina. It's talking about that it's your backyard where you are growing fruits and vegetables, and there is at least peripherally an issue of work in the land. And therefore, what are we saying? We're saying that it's mutter to build a wall. Now, why would I think you can't build a wall to protect your gina during Shvius? And the answer is, there's a halacha in Hilchas Shvius that since it has to be hefker and available to everyone to come and use from your property, I might think that by building such a wall, you're like closing it off to the aniyim, or you're closing it off to other people, and therefore maybe it should be usher. Kamash Malan, it's not a problem as long as you leave like doors open and you leave them access. You'd be allowed to build such a wall. And therefore, what do you see? You see from here that the halacha of our Mishnah is only true, where, let me say it this way, it's not muchach like Rav Chizda, but it seems like it's misayeya that it's like Rav Chizda, because Rav Chizda's halacha is only true when it's a hefsed mu'at, and we just explained that the Mishnah is only talking about a hefsed mu'at. Now, there's no raya from here what the halacha would be by a hefsed meruba. It's just that it's misayeya to the din of Rav Chizda that we're making the Mishnah as talking about that. Okay, let's move on to the next Mishnah.
And everybody learns that's Shan Rav Chizda.
Maisuman, you're talking about?
Yeah.
No.
Because it doesn't say Ikim Mechusman. I mean, Rav Chizda should have said.
Meaning the words Maisuman, the way I'm explaining it, you mean?
Amar Rav Chizda L'Shem Chasagina because of the Chatzar Banikidakai.
Yes.
Everybody says Pshat because they have some meruba?
Rashi says hefsed mu'at, hefsed meruba. Yeah, that's why Rashi learns. I mean, it could be other Rishonim. I didn't see. Other Rishonim learn differently. What I'm connecting the Gemara is the way most Rishonim understand the juxtaposition of this case and that case.
He lost it again.
Yeah, it's been out for, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it. It's just too much. Is the bigger juxtaposition here is the shinoi question, right? So the question of whether the heter of the full wall versus the Maisa Uman versus Maisa, meaning what is the explanation for the shinui above by the the rat, the pest control? Why is the shinui going to be mutter? What does the shinui help? Meaning you could just say it's a regular normal din of kala achar yad, but it's not really mashma that there is even a kala achar yad here. The answer is it's a distinction between Maisa Uman and Maisa Ed. We'll just pick the Mishnah up. Do you have to leave in a minute, or do you have a couple minutes? You're good. You have to go, or you're good? I mean, it has service now, but I don't know what I sort of feel like it's. I have it recorded here, and I'll upload it that way. Okay. Let's take a look. We're about to embark on a little bit of Hilchas Mitzayra. So I just want to give a very brief akdama. It came up in Megillah on Daf Ches. If you remember when we were going through all those Mishnahs, the Ein Bein Zeh Lezeh, Ein Bein Zeh Lezeh, and every Mishnah was saying Ein Bein Zeh Lezeh except this, and then the Gemara would make a diak. That's mashma that. So no, but one of the Ein Beins over there was the Ein Bein Mitzora Musgar Le Mitzora Muchla. So let me just outside. A person sees a white patch on his skin. Now there are 4 colors four versions of white. You have to know your RGB, color breakdown. There are four colors of white. There's a sahes, there's a baheres, there's a sapachas of each one. So there's four different things. One's snow, one's the color of the inside of an egg. The other one's the color of like brand new wool of a young sheep. There's different what do you call it? There's different colors. So the point is that if you see such a thing, then the halacha is you got to bring it to a kayan. Meaning, and the rule by Mitzaira is that the kayan is he's like a doctor, but more than a doctor. If he doesn't say you're tameh, you're not tameh. Even if let's say you have a kayan who's a retired kayan. Let's say he became puzzle or he became a chalal. He knows everything there is to know. Oh, when are you leaving? You leaving tonight?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Have a safe trip.
Are you going to be on the Zoom?
Yeah.
All right. Have a safe trip.
I'll have a better view than.
Well, hopefully I'm going to be doing it over there. Now we know when we go to Rabbi Blinder, the Wi-Fi is aloholech. So, or we have to come up with another mahal for recording.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So.
You know where it is? It's over there. Right?
Yeah, I'll pick it up before we go. So a mitzaira again. So you have to bring it to the kayan, and let's say you have a kayan who's retired. He's no longer became a chalal, whatever it is. He knows everything there is to know about the maris and the halach. But the halach is if he's not a kayan, he can't pass it on the shaila. So you need the kayan to say tameh. So the halacha goes like this: you have to take you show the tzaras, you show the nega to a kayan, and if the kayan sees that it's one of the four colors that are a problem, similar to like a nida shaila, we have an issue over here. Now, just because something has a color of a nega, that's tzaras, does not mean that you are a full-fledged tzaras. Now, you are a full-fledged tzaras, but there's two types of mitzayras. There's a mitzayra musgar and a mitzayra muchlat. What's the difference? So we'll take muchlat, it's easier. If, let's say, any one of these lesions, let's call it, any one of these patches, has a siman tuma, which for now we'll define as two white hairs on the inside, or an area that is unaffected in its inside of the lesion. That's a siman tuma, and you are gepaskin in that moment. The kayan says not only are you a tzaras, you're a mitzayra muchlat, and then you have the halachas of a mitzayra muchlat. We'll get to that in a second. If, on the other hand, and this is typically what happens, you see the lesion does not have simani tuma, so we have it's a waiting game. So basically, the rule is that you're musgar, and without getting into so we have to see if it's going to spread. So basically, what we do is we tell you got to wait 7 days. During those 7 days, you're tameh. Tameh misafek, however you understand it in lumdis, but you're tameh. You're called a mitzayra musgar, and during that time, you have 7 days. At the end of 7 days, the kayan checks again to see if it's spread, which would be another form of tuma, or if it sees two hairs or other things. If you see simani tuma, then you become a mitzayra muchlat. If another 7 days go by, and at the end of those 7 days it has not shown any simani tuma, then you are tahor memela. So again, it's 2 weeks basically in a row of being a mitzayra musgar, unless you show simane tuma, or the kohen could come back at the end of week 1 and say it's completely healed. Very unlikely, but it can happen. So there are really sort of 3 options of what can happen at the end of your first week. At the end of your first week, it's either healed,
Stay another week.
you become a muchlet, or you stay another week. At the end of the second week, only 2 possibilities. Either you're tahar, or you become a muchlet. And once you're a muchlet, there's 2 possibilities also. You're either tahar, because it's completely healed, or it's still a problem, in which case then you have to continue. So those are the 2 sort of statuses. Let's not get too bogged down in a moment with differences between musgar and muchlet in terms of their halachos, because, as we'll see in our Gemara, there are some points that are going to be made in our Gemara that are things that the Rishonim seem to argue very aggressively about, and in our Gemara, I don't want to take sides in that machlekes yet, because I'd rather have a way through our Gemara that makes sense. But let's just understand that a muchlet is considered, I don't want to use the word merchamer, but it is considered a more serious tuma, the tahara process of a muchlet. And that for sure is the case. The tahara process of a muchlet is significantly more aggressive than a muskar. A muskar's tahara process is pretty much, if it does not become, after 2 weeks, a siman tuma, and he just memela, he's good. Whereas a muchlet has to get 2 birds, and azov, and the cedar, and whatever, and then he's got to shave his head, and he's got to go to the mikvah, then he's got to come back, and then he spritzes the blood. It's a very complicated process. He goes to the mikvah twice. There's another halacha that's important to discuss over here, which is that the mitzora muchlat, for sure, and maybe this is discussion in the Gemara in Megillah, by a muskar as well, but we're going to work within our Gemara that the muskar does not do this, is the halacha of being chutz lamachne. The halacha by a mitzayra is that he has to go outside of the city of Yerushalayim, any city in Eretz Yisrael that has a walled city, so Yerushalayim. He's got to go outside the machna, calls him on that he's a mitzayra. Muchlat. And a musgar, we're going to work within our Gemara as if he does not have to. This is very difficult with the Gemara and Daf Ches and Megillah, where the Mishnah is mashma that it's the same for a musgar and a muchlet, so that's a kasha and Rashi, as we'll explain the Gemara. Okay, so that being the case, what's our Mishnah talking about? This halacha that the mitzora has to go to the kohen, or the kohen has to go out to the mitzora to paskin on him whether he's tahor or tameh, because again, you can only get the heter or the tumah or the tahara from the kohen. Can it be done on chalamayid? Now, why would you think it cannot be done on chalamayid? Very simple. There's a halacha in chalamayid, like all of Yom Tov, of samachta b'chagecha, and therefore we do not want to cause any undue stress to this person on Yom Tov because of the mitzvah simchas Yom Tov. So therefore, if one can avoid paskining on him that is tameh, we try to avoid it. And this is something that we'll see that both Reb Meir and Reb Yossi, who's the chachamim in our Mishnah, are going to agree to. They are going to argue on whether one, once they see a nega that is tameh, if they have a right as a kayan to be shosek, to be quiet. Do they have a chiyuv to paskin in one way or the other? That's the opinion of Reb Yossi. Or do we say no? Reb Meir, who says, he'll say from the way he understands it, is that a kayan has no chiyuv to paskin tameh until he wants to, and until he actually says the words tameh, no matter how much the tsaras looks tameh, doesn't matter. Until he paskins tameh, he doesn't have to. That's going to be the machlekes in the Gemara. So let's see it inside. Reb Meir oimer royin es hanegayim. Skip the word betchila. Royin es hanegayim lehakel avaloy lahachmir, and I'm reading it into the way the Gemara will explain it.
Don't say anything.
That you don't say anything, meaning, and therefore you can check in on chalamayid.
Say
because
anything.
if it's going to be tameh, you just stay quiet, and if it's tahor, you can be matahar him. And we'll have to see in the Gemara exactly when Reb Meir's, under what certain, right? There's 4 possibilities of when this can be. It can be before, at the time when the nega is being shown the first time. It could be at the end of the first week, at the end of the second week, and then once he's a muchlet, at the end of that period of time. So there's 4 potential times. The Chachamim Oimrim, and we'll see in the Gemara, this is Reb Yossi, loy lahaka v'lo lahachmir, meaning you don't paskin shaylas of negayim on chalamayid, because since if it's tameh, you'll have to say something, and Avada, I agree with Reb Meir that we want to avoid having some simchas Yom Tov being in his battle. Therefore, we don't paskin negayim shaylas on chalamayid. Okay, Zakti Gemara, a brisa, which according to most Rishonim is the Zelbazach from the Mishnah. Tanya, Reb Meir Omer royin es hanegayim lahakel avalo lahachmir. Reb Yossi Omer loy lahakel v'lo lahachmir. And here we get a little bit of an insight as to what the pshat is, and we said it already. Is she'im ata niskak loy lahakel niskak le'af lahachmir. As we'll see in Amid Beis, Reb Yossi is under the impression from Psukim that you have no right as a kohen to stay quiet once you're in a situation where you know that he's tameh. You'll have to say it, and therefore we avoid sending you in front of the kohen because we don't want the kohen to have to paskin tameh. Whereas Reb Meir holds you can be shosik, and therefore it's mutter. Zakti Gemara, Amar Rebbe, and this is an important line here. Even though Reb Meir and the Chachamim, Reb Yossi, are arguing, and they don't seem to be arguing in only one specific case. It seems that their machlekes almost sort of goes across the board. Rebbe, who was a Talmud of each one of them, right? Rebbe nirin, so Amar Rebbe nirin divrei Reb Meir b'muskar, v'divrei Reb Yossi b'muchlet. He says that I paskin halacha l'maisa like Reb Meir b'muskar, and I paskin like Reb Yossi b'muchlet. So let's just work out what that means. Reb Meir, who says you paskin shailas, you can go in front of the kohen, and therefore you don't have to talk about tumah. I hold that by musgar, meaning at the end of the first week, let's make it simple. So at the end of the first week that he's there, what are the options? Option 1 is that he's tahor. Well, that's great. Option 2 is that he's completely tameh. Well, that's not great, but it's not really that much worse than what he's anyways already tameh. He's anyways already in a waiting pattern. And if you're going to tell him that it's in between and he has to continue for another week, then it's weiter the same thing. So Reb Meir basically says that if there's a bad situation, right, then Zokt Rebbe. I hold like Reb Meir, meaning that even though I agree with Reb Yossi and halacha that if you see a tumah, you have to say something, I'll still say you could pass in the shaila by a muzer, because really, what's the worst that's going to happen? Okay, so he becomes a muchlet. It's not better, but he's tameh to tameh to tameh. It's really not that big of a deal, and so therefore it should be fine. Meaning, I disagree with Reb Meir in svara, but I agree with him in psak that you can go at the end of the first week and you can.
But you have to say something.
And if he's a muchlet, you'll have to tell him he's a muchlet.
Honestly,
you have to tell him honestly. But I hold that that's not called such a problem in Simchas Yom Tov. And I hold like Rabbi Yossi by a muchlet, meaning at the very end you don't send. Meaning if someone's already a muchlet, now we don't pass him the shaila. Why? Because it's binary. Either he's tahor, in which case then great. But if he's tameh, meaning you have to continue that tumah, that's a problem. You're really ruining and sharing his yantiv. Then zakt Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, I hold like Rabbi Yossi for a muchlet. That's how he passes. Now, if I'd ask you, what do Rabbi Yossi and what do Reb Meir themselves say? They hold you don't pass in the musker and muchlet. The Rabbi Yossi would say no muchlet and no musgar on yantiv, and Reb Meir says no problem, you can do it all. So it's not that Rebbe's explaining their machlekes. Rebbe's almost like a third shita. He's basically coming along and saying, I agree with Rabbi Yossi, ben Ogeya, the shaila of whether you're allowed to stay quiet. You must say something. But I hold that the loss of the Simchas Yantiv that happens by finding you go from a musgar to a muchlet ain't that big deal, and therefore it's going to be okay. Amar Rava, Rava is going to say a slightly different mahalach, but it's a very similar idea. And when we see Rava, we'll see what's pshat in Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Reb Meir, Reb Yossi. Amar Rava, b'tahor. When you're talking about the first time that you can visit the kayin, kuli amalei pligi de loy chazilei. Everyone agrees. Even Reb Meir would hold. You don't pass on that shaila. Why? Because there's no upside. It's all downside. Right now, the guy is completely tahor. If you're going to say he's tahor, you haven't given him anything he doesn't already have. And if you're going to say he's tummy, that's a problem. Reb Meir wouldn't say you're tummy, so there's no point in going there. Reb Yossi certainly would say you don't pass on that shaila because it would be a problem of simchas yantiv. Behezger rishon, meaning at the end of the first week, the kuli amalei pligi de chazile. Then even Rabbi Yossi would agree, and here it's Rava saying effectively what Rebbe said 2 seconds ago, which is at the end of the first week, even though, yes, technically speaking, it would be worse to become a muchlet versus a muskar, because now you have vadai tuma and you have a much more difficult tahara process, but you're going from tameh to tameh. It's not like we're talking about making you tahara anyways, and so therefore and here the Rishonim speak out, the likelihood of becoming completely tahara at the end of the first week is very unlikely. You don't go from having a lesion to having it completely removed inside of a week. Therefore, even though it is possible that you can have a tahara, the likelihood is that it's either going to be musgar or muchlet. Therefore, even Reb Yossi would agree that you can go ahead and paskin that shaila there, because since it's possible you'll be metaher him, it can't hurt because the downside really isn't that bad. Ki pligi, where are they really arguing? And again, Rebbe would disagree with Rava. Rava is suggesting that their machlekes only exists by musgar. Rebbe would say, no, their machlekes goes across the board. I'll paskin like one here and like the other there. But regardless, in cheshbon it works out to be the same. What's their machlekes? Ki pligi behezger sheni. That when it's behezger sheni, which is the end of the second week, where now you no longer have three options. This is the way some Rishonim speak out. Reb Yossi also, like I just mentioned, Reb Yossi would say that he'll agree that at the end of the first week you can go. Why? Because Reb Yossi's halacha that says you have to tell the truth is only true when, as we'll see in a minute, when it's a binary option, tahor tameh. But if you have three options, then the pasuk isn't talking, and he would agree to Reb Meir that there you don't have to say if you don't want to. It's only when you have one choice, tahor tameh, you have to say both, one or the other. But when it's option, when you have three options, you don't have to. So therefore, at the end of the first week, you have three options. You have mamish tahor, you have you're a muchlet, tameh, or you have the middle case of continue to be a musgar. Whereas now, but at the end of the second week, you only have two options. You're either going to be tahor because it's become completely healed, or it's tameh, you become a muchlet. But that's it, right? So behezger sheni, so here he has no option, so that's the machlekes. Mar savar, Reb Meir holds b'koyin talia milsa, you need the koyin to say it, and eat tahor amr le tahor v'eat tameh shasik, and therefore there's no reason why you shouldn't pass in the shaila. Mar and Rabbi Yossi savar letahara or letama ksiv. The pasuk says letahara letama. Here you see it's a binary question. Therefore, since you can only do one of two things, the halacha is you shouldn't pass in the shaila. And if I'll ask Rabbi Yossi, according to Rava, what's the halacha when you're talking about a muchlet? So a muchlet, l'chayr Rabbi Yossi would also hold over there, because there it's also a binary situation, right? But it could be Rav Meir would hold there. No, I mean it could be what the Gemara means over here when it says that at the end of the Hezger Sheni, they're arguing, it means they're also arguing by a muchlet as well, because by muchlet you really have the same discussion. Fine. Amr Mar, going back to Rebbe. Amr Mar, Amr Rebbe, near and Divrei Rabbi Yosef ben Muchlet, Divrei Meir ben Musgar.
You have to go 7 minutes, no.
Okay, so
you won't finish you won't finish page 7 minutes, will you?
It goes, once I finish this next line, it actually goes pretty fast.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes pretty fast. So, I mean, we could spend time on it, but I want to go fast. Amar Mar, Amar Rebbe, near and Divrei Rabbi Yosef ben Muchlet, v'Divrei Rabbi Meir ben Musgar. Rebbe holds that we say no paskening the shaila when it's a muchlet, because we don't want to share his simchas yantiv. Right. Whereas by a muskar, it's no big deal, because ben kach going to be tameh. I v'hatanya ibcha, that the opposite that he paskins, you don't paskin the shailas by muskar, but you do paskin the shailas by muchlet. So how do you fix it? Meaning, how do you fix it that we'd prefer, because again, no matter what Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yossi, that says if you find yourself in a scenario where you're tameh, you got to paskin the shailah. So then the question is which one of these psukim is Rebbe hold is worse for the Mitzayra? And it's going to depend upon whether you're passing that he's a Mitzayra Muchlet or you're passing as a Mitzayra Muskar. And I'll say it outside. The difference is because the Gemara is working within the assumption that, at least according to Rebbe, the major difference between a Mitzayra Muchlet and a Mitzayra Muskar, besides the Tahara process and everything else, the major distinction is a Mitzayra Muskar is going to be Asr B'Tashmish Amita with his wife, and the Mitzayra Muchlet is going to be mutter b'tash
It
shamita.
might be better.
So in a certain sense, a Mitzayra Muchlet for a person who...
That's where the from.
That's right. Whereas the other opinion is going to say that no, meaning... That's what Rebbe holds halach l'maisa. The question is, there's two Tanoim that are arguing about what Rebbe held. Meaning, did Rebbe hold that people, generally speaking, prefer to be able to be amongst their friends, but also to their wife? Or would they prefer to be chutz l'machana, but with their wife? And you can hear already all the Latzanim saying which way to go. But the point is that the Tanoim are arguing in Shitas Rebbe.
He holds with his friends.
So a musgar, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that according to Rashi, this is how we're explaining the Gemara, this is very difficult in the Mishnah in Megillah, because over there the Mishnah is mashma, that a musgar also goes chutz l'machana. But we're going to be working within the Gemara that the musgar stays inside the machana, but he's also with his wife, and the muchlet goes chutz l'machana and he's mutter with his wife. He basically takes his wife on vacation, whereas the musgar stays inside, and therefore, now, how does the Gemara explain itself? Tanoihi aliba de Rebbe, mar savar, meaning the second brisa, that holds that Rebbe was saying, we don't want you paskening shailas by a musgar, is because what's going to happen if he finds out that he's making him a muchlet?
There you go.
Right? Well, it goes like this. He'll paskin like Rebbe Yossi by musgar that you don't paskin the shaila, because if you show up, that shita will hold savar tzavsa de alma adiflei. That person... That Tana would rather be amongst his chaverim. And so since right now he's a musker and he's amongst his chaverim, the only thing he doesn't have is he can't be with his wife. So, okay, big deal. He's okay with that. But if you tell me there's a muchlet, now he's got to go to chutz l'machana, his simchas yontiv is completely stared because now he can't be amongst his friends, he can't go to shul, whatever it is. Whereas Mar Savar, the Shita who held that when Rebbe paskin the shaila, he paskin that, he paskins like Rebbe Yossi only by a muchlet. But by a musgar, he'll say like Rav Meir, like we had learned before, will be because Savar Tzavsid de Ishtay Adifale, that he holds that it's more important for a person to be able to be with his wife. So therefore, since he's currently a muchlet, and he's chutz l'machna, and he's mutter to be with his wife, he's going to paskin over there like Rebbe Yossi. Why? Because if he shows up, and it turns out that other way around, that he's a musgar, now it's going to come out that he's also b'tash shamita. And that he doesn't want. So therefore, we don't paskin that shaila of a muchlet, because it'll come out potentially that you're going to make him a musgar. And therefore, it's a difulate. Fine. Now, this entire explanation of the Gemara is predicated on the idea that we're going to make a distinction between a musgar and a muchlet b'negei tash shamita. For the Gemara, remember the muchlet mutter b'tash shamita? It says in Vatanya, this Vatanya is benichusa, that, I'll bring you a raya, at least that Rebbe holds that the distinction between a muchlet and a musgar is tash shamita. Where do you see the Vatanya? The Brisa says like this: V'yashem michutz la'ahalo shivas yamim. This Mitzayra has to go outside of his oyel for 7 days. Yehei also b'tash shamita. How do I know?
Muchlet.
This is talking about a muchlet. How do I know that it's also b'tash shamita? Ve'ein ahaloi ela ishta, is because his wife. Ahaloi must mean his wife. Shedemar lecha leich emor lehem shuvu lechem like le'ahalechem. When by her Sinai there was an isotashmish, they said go back to their ahalechem, and therefore we learned out that it's talking about. So you see, there's an isotashmish from mita. That's this first shita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no shivas yamim yisapru lai. Right, he has to count 7 days, meaning the muchlet counts 7 days. Right. Or maybe the musgar counts 7 days. Yemei svira velo yemei chilutai. So you see that the iser tashmish is only when he's counting, but not when he's a muchlet. So that's where you see this shita of. Now we don't know that that's Rebbe necessarily. That'll be the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Aimer, no. Zayin yemei svira kal v'chaymer yemei chiluta. So they're arguing about whether we make a kal v'chaymer from the pasuk by musgar to muchlet, or do we keep it by musgar? Meaning, and again, the Kal V'Chaymer is going to be that Chaluto is a more Chomer Tahara process, and whatever it is, therefore, maybe we'll say that even there, for sure, there's an Isser Tashbet Amita. Now, so far you have no raya that Rebbe holds this. But Rebbe Chia, Danti Lifnei Rebbe, I said in front of Rebbe, Limdetenu Rebbeinu, did Rebbe not teach us Yosam, who was the son of Uziyahu HaMelech? Uziyahu HaMelech was a known Mitzayra, who was a Mitzayra Muchlet. Yosam Lahayoloi Uziyahu El B'Yemei Chalutai. We know that he was born to him during his Mitzayra Muchlet days, meaning what? That it was mutter for Uziyahu HaMelech, who was a tzaddik, to be with his wife. So you see that he was chutz l'machne with his wife. He had to do his entire reign, was outside of Yerushalayim. But during that entire time, he had Yosam. Yosam was born to him. So what do you see? You see that you were allowed to have Tash Shamita. So you see by a Muchlet it's mutter, meaning, and that'll be a right of Rebbe. And what did Rebbe say? Afani kachamati. So I said such the same thing. Okay, so Lamaisa, we have a machlekes here and how to darshan psukim. So meaning that's the end of the Gemara, just in terms of Rebbe's shita and how he holds. Now the Gemara is just going to understand where we darshan the psukim from. But Maikim, what's the machlekes between these two shitas in the brisa of where we darshan? Do we say that there's an isser tash shamita by a muchlet or not? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Savar, meaning he says there's an Isser Tashmish even by Mochlet Savar, Gali Rachmana B'Yimei Sefira V'Kol Shkein B'Yimei Chaluto, like we saw in the Brisa. Umar Savar, no, Mai the Galilei, Umay the Loi Galilei, Loi Galilei. What the Torah revealed, it revealed. When it didn't reveal, it didn't reveal. Lememra, and I was going back in the whole discussion over it. This entire discussion in Mitzayra is predicated on the idea that if the Kohen doesn't open his mouth, then he's not tummy, even if it has all of the siman tuma. Remember the Bekayin Talia Milsa? Yeah, Gemara says in V'atanya again, another V'atanya b'nichusa. Like the pasuk says, B'yoyim harazbay, which we darshan to mean that there's yesh yoyim shata raya. There are days when the Kohen sees him. V'yesh yoyim she'iyata raya. Meaning there are days the Kohen does. Meaning there are days the Kohen says tummy, and there are days the Kohen says no, I'm going to be quiet. Meaning what we try not to pass in the shaila, but if you pass in the shaila, you don't say anything, right? Mikan amru chason shenar lebay nega. Noistan loy zayin yemei amishtal loy ulebeisay ulechsusay. You see a chassan, because of the needs for him to be misamech ishtay, then he has a nega. It's going to be a problem now because it's going to create a problem for the shava bracha. It's going to be a problem with his wife. So the halacha is noistin loy zayin yemei mishta. You don't pass in the shaila, or if you see it's a tameh, you say yishaisik. Like Woodmere, like we saw before, loy for him, and that's not only true for him, but for lebesa, let's say his house has a nega, you can say the same thing. Well, l'ksusai, because there's negayim for all these things. The halacha is that even though he would be a mitzayra, you don't have to pass in the shaila that he's tamei, and you let him have a tahara. V'chein beregel, noistin loy shivas yemei haregel. Same thing goes by yantiv. This is what we're our sugi here. That you give him the 7 days of yantiv. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda and Rebbe Omer Einoi Tzarich. You don't have to give him the 7 days.
Einoi Tzarich means you don't have to give him the 7 days?
Meaning you don't have to worry about giving him the 7 days because you have the other heter, Harehu Omer Vitziva Hakayin Ufanu Es Habayis, meaning which is talking about a Mitzoras bias. When a person has a tzaras in his house, that we give him, even though we see that he has a tumah, we give him time to go throughout his house and take all of this stuff out because we know he's about to have a tumah in his house and everything's going to become tummy. If you have anything you want to save, maybe take it outside. So what do you see? This is a svara that Rebbe says. Imam tinim loy l'davar harishus. You see, we allow him to take all of his stuff out of his house just to save some money. Kol shkein l'dvar mitzvah, that we're going to prevent him from becoming tameh. Meaning they're not arguing over what the halacha is. They're arguing over what's the makar.
The first one is Bayam Harosbo.
Yeah. So the first shita, which is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that it's learned out from the pasuk of B'yom Harosloi. So therefore, Yesh Yom She'ataraya Boy, Yesh Yom She'ataraya Boy, and therefore you don't pass in the shaila. Whereas Rebbe says you don't need that pasuk. I have a separate svara. I can learn it out from the Mitzaras bias, where the Tzaras bias, the halacha is we allow him to go into the house to take out all of his stuff, which is like just to save some money. So obviously it's a kol sheken. If we're going to let him do that, we're going to hold off on paskening tameh for a yontiv or for a chasen to be mekayim his mitzvahs. So my beinai, what's the nafkamina between these two shitas? They're saying the same halacha. They're just arguing where they get it from. So Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Mashmos Darshnik Bena. There's no halacha nafkamina. They're just arguing over where you darshan from. V'Rava Amar Davar Harishus Bena. No, there is actually a distinction because if you hold that you're learning it out from Mitzaras Habayis, then over there we're saying that it's mutter to even not paskin the shaila just in rishus, just to save a couple of dollars. Whereas according to the first shita, it could be that if it's not zayin yemei mishta for a chasen, or if it's not for a simchas regel, it could be there the kohen has no right to not paskin the shaila. Rameir, like we said before, Rameir would say you can be shaisik. Maybe you can only be shaisik l'tzarich mitzvah, but you can't be shaisik l'tzarich rishus. So it could come out that there would be a chapanaf gemina.
According to what it says, you're from bias, you mashma.
So over there, what we say is that
if you're
allowed to not paskin the bias as tameh until he gets all his stuff out, and why are you doing that? Just to have him save some money? So then certainly it's going to be true for a dvar mitzvah. If that's where your drasha comes from, so then maybe you could say that in all inyane mitzayra that the kohen can be shaisik if he sees tumah, if the motivating reason is in order to save the guy some money. But maybe if you learn it from a pasuk, so sometimes you do see, sometimes you don't. Where over there we use that to teach you specifically by a mitzvah. It could be that the heter to not paskin the shaila would only exist if it's lidvar mitzvah, but not lidvar mitzvah not. Now the Gemara has a machlekes back and forth over here, but we'll pause it over here because.